Verified incident logs. Authentic footage. Pure accountability. Welcome to Bodycam Incident Reports.
Stand up. Turn around. Hands where I can see them. Now.
Am I being detained, sir, or am I free to go?
Don't play lawyer with me. You don't belong out here.
I'm sitting on a public bench. Drawing. That's not a crime.
I smell weed. That gives me probable cause.
The footage is grainy, stabilized only by the software of a high-end smartphone propped against a concrete water fountain. It was 6:45 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. The sun was setting over Silver Lake, a sprawling manicured reservoir in the heart of Oak Creek, a suburb where the average home price hovered just north of $2 million. The light was golden, hitting the water in that perfect, serene way that real estate agents put on brochures. But the audio told a different story. Sergeant Clay Thorne was 25 years on the force. He was a relic of a different era of policing, broad-shouldered, thick-necked, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain. He didn't wear a body camera because the union contract in Oak Creek still allowed senior officers to opt out of the pilot program. He liked it that way. He believed in instinct. He believed in police work, which in his vocabulary meant trusting the gut feeling that told him who belonged and who didn't. And to Clay Thorne, the boy on the bench didn't belong. Elijah Banks, a black male 17 years old. He was wearing a dark gray hoodie, loose jeans, and expensive sneakers. A heavy canvas backpack sat at his feet. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He was sitting on a park bench, looking out at the ducks drifting near the reeds, sketching in a notebook. To the residents walking their golden retrievers and pushing strollers, Elijah was just a teenager. But Thorne saw something else. He saw a threat. He saw a predator in a prey-rich environment. He pulled his cruiser onto the walking path, something technically forbidden, and hit the lights. No siren. Just the silent, blinding strobe of red and blue bouncing off the calm water. Thorne stepped out of the vehicle, his hand already resting on the grip of his service weapon, not drawing it, but letting the world know it was there. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Thorne growled, closing the distance. "Stand up, turn around, and keep your mouth shut." Elijah didn't panic. That was the first thing that irritated Thorne. The kid didn't flinch. He didn't scramble. He closed his notebook, slowly placed his pen in the spiral binding, and looked up. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and terrifyingly calm. "Am I being detained, officer?" Elijah asked. His voice was smooth, educated. "You're being investigated," Thorne snapped. "We've had reports of break-ins in this neighborhood. You fit the description." There was no description. There had been no break-ins reported that week. Thorne was fishing. He was doing what he had done for 2 decades, shaking the tree to see what fell out. "What description is that?" Elijah asked, standing up slowly, keeping his hands visible, palms open. "A student sitting on a bench." "Don't get smart with me, boy." Thorne stepped into Elijah's personal space. The size difference was significant. Thorne was 6'2". Elijah was maybe 5'9", slight build. "I smell marijuana. That gives me everything I need." It was the oldest lie in the book. The wind was blowing off the lake. The air smelled of algae and distant charcoal grills. There was no weed. Elijah knew it. Thorne knew it. But in the legal dance of the street, the odor of narcotics was the magic key that unlocked the Fourth Amendment. "I don't smoke," Elijah said, his gaze drifting to the phone propped on the fountain. "And I don't consent to any searches." "Your consent," Thorne muttered, grabbing Elijah's wrist and spinning him around, "is not required." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud in the quiet park. A woman jogging nearby slowed down, pulling her earbuds out. A couple walking a terrier stopped 10 yards away, phones coming out. Thorne ignored them. He lived for the conflict. He slammed Elijah against the hood of the cruiser, not hard enough to leave a bruise, but hard enough to dominate. "Stay there." Thorne walked back to the bench. He didn't look at the notebook. He didn't look at the sketch. He went straight for the canvas backpack. "You can't open that," Elijah shouted from the hood of the car, his voice finally cracking with emotion. "You need a warrant. That's personal property." "Probable cause," Thorne yelled back, unzipping the main compartment. Smell of narcotics emanating from the bag. He dumped the contents onto the pristine grass. Textbooks. AP Calculus. History of the American West. A graphing calculator. A pencil case. A water bottle. A sandwich wrapped in foil. Thorne kicked the calculus book aside with the toe of his boot. Nothing. No drugs. No paraphernalia. He felt the heat rising in his neck. The crowd was growing. He could feel the lenses of a dozen iPhones pointed at his back. He was losing the narrative. He needed something. He needed a win. He picked up the bag again, shaking it upside down. He felt a hard rectangular object in the hidden laptop lining at the back. He reached in his fingers, brushing against cold metal. Gotcha, Thorne whispered. He pulled it out. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't a brick of cocaine. It was a jewelry box, mahogany polished with a gold latch. It looked antique. It looked like something that belonged on a vanity in one of the mansions lining the ridge, not in the backpack of a teenager in a hoodie. Thorne looked at Elijah. The boy's face had changed. The defiance was gone, replaced by a shuttered, stony expression. Nice box, Thorne said, holding it up for the dash cam he knew was recording. Family heirloom? Or did we just go shopping at the estate on the hill? It's mine, Elijah said. The calm was back, but it was brittle now. Thorne popped the latch. Inside, nestled on white velvet, was a diamond necklace. A heavy platinum chain with a teardrop diamond that caught the fading sunlight and threw rainbows across the officer's uniform. It was easily worth $50,000. Maybe more. Right? Thorne scoffed. And I'm the King of England. Check the engraving, Elijah said softly. Thorne paused. He lifted the heavy piece of jewelry. On the back of the platinum setting in tiny elegant script were the letters EMH. Always. Who is EMH? Thorne demanded, walking back to the suspect. The lady you stole this from? It stands for Elijah Marcus Holloway, the boy said. My grandmother gave it to me to hold. She's in the hospital. I was sketching the lake before I went to see her. Thorne laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. You expect me to believe you're walking around with the Hope diamond in a school bag because your grandma gave it to you. You're under arrest for possession of stolen property. You have no report of it being stolen, Elijah said. You have no victim. You have no crime. You just have a black kid with something nice and you can't wrap your small mind around it. That was it. The trigger. Thorne grabbed Elijah by the collar and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. He slammed the door hard enough to shake the vehicle. He didn't care about the jewelry anymore. He didn't care about the law. He wanted to break this kid. He radioed it in. Dispatch one in custody at the North Boat Ramp. Suspicion of burglary. High-value items recovered. Send a transport. As Thorne waited, he watched the crowd. They were hostile now. Why did you arrest him? A woman shouted. He was just drawing. What did you find? Books. Thorne stared right through them. He knew how this worked. He'd find the report later. Someone in this rich neighborhood was missing a necklace. He'd match it up, tag the evidence, and this kid would be in the system before the sun fully set. He was doing his job. He was protecting the sheep from the wolves, even if the sheep baaed at him while he did it. But Clay Thorne had made a mistake. A massive, career-ending mistake. Because 30 minutes later, the video hit Twitter. The clip was captioned, Oak Creek PD harasses honors student. Illegal search. Racial profiling at its finest. Hashtag justice for Elijah. It went supernova. By 9:00 p.m. it had 2 million views. By midnight it was on CNN. The narrative was perfect. Elijah Banks Holloway wasn't just a random teen. The internet sleuths found him instantly. He was a senior at Oak Creek High, captain of the debate team, a scholarship finalist for Stanford. His Instagram was full of sketches, architectural drawings, and photos of him volunteering at a soup kitchen. He was the model citizen. And Clay Thorne. The internet dug up his past in record time. 3 excessive force complaints in the 90s. A suspension in 2004 for unprofessional conduct during a traffic stop involving a Hispanic family. A photo from his private Facebook page showing him wearing a t-shirt with a thin blue line Punisher skull. The world saw a villain and a hero. The headline screamed, Honor student arrested for doing homework. Racist cop plants suspicion to search minority teen. The necklace defense: why can't black boys have heirlooms? Protesters were outside the Oak Creek precinct by 2 a.m. They held candles and signs. Firethorn. Elijah matters. The mayor, terrified of the optics in an election year, issued a statement at dawn condemning the disturbing deviation from protocol. Elijah was released at 4 a.m. No charges filed yet. The stolen necklace was logged into evidence, but the police couldn't find a theft report matching it. There was no burglary, no broken window, no 911 call from a panicked rich lady. Elijah walked out of the station into a sea of microphones. He looked tired, small, and dignified. "I just wanted to draw," he told the cameras, his voice trembling just enough to break a million hearts. "He told me I didn't belong there. He told me I smelled like drugs. I've never touched a drug in my life. I had my grandmother's necklace because she's passing away and she wanted me to have it safe. It's the only thing she has left." A reporter shouted, "Did he hurt you, Elijah?" Elijah touched his wrist where the handcuffs had pinched. "He hurt my dignity," he said. "He made me feel like I was nothing." The clip of that answer won the internet. A GoFundMe for Elijah's college tuition hit $500,000 in 6 hours. Celebrities tweeted his name. An NBA star wore a jersey with Elijah on the back during warm-ups. Sergeant Clay Thorne was placed on administrative leave without pay pending an internal investigation. His gun and badge were taken. He was sent home to a house that was already being circled by news vans. To the world, the story was over. The racist cop lost. The brilliant kid won. Justice was swift. But the evidence locker at Oak Creek PD is a cold, quiet place. And items logged there have a way of telling stories that Twitter threads miss. Detective Sarah Miller was assigned to clean up Thorne's mess. She hated Thorne. She thought he was a dinosaur, a liability, who made the job harder for every good cop in the precinct. She wanted to nail him. She wanted to prove the search was illegal, return the necklace, and close the book. She sat in the lab wearing blue latex gloves looking at the mahogany box. "All right, let's process this and get it back to the kid," she muttered. She opened the box. The necklace sparkled. It was beautiful. EMH. Always. It matched the kid's story perfectly. Elijah Marcus Holloway. She picked up the box to photograph it. As she tilted it, she felt something shift. The weight was off. The bottom was too thick. Miller frowned. She tapped the bottom of the box. It sounded hollow. "False bottom," she whispered. She grabbed a small pick tool and wedged it into the seam of the velvet lining. With a soft pop, the false floor lifted. There was no money inside, no drugs. There was a folded piece of paper and a small silver SD card. Miller unfolded the paper. It was a receipt. From a pawn shop in downtown Chicago dated 3 years ago. The item listed platinum teardrop necklace, sold by Marcus Holloway. Miller blinked. If Elijah Marcus sold it 3 years ago, how did he have it now? And why was the receipt hidden? She put the SD card into her computer. She expected family photos, maybe a digital will. What she saw made the blood drain from her face. The video file was dated 2 hours before Thorne stopped Elijah. The timestamp was 4:30 p.m. The camera angle was low, propped up on a shelf or a table. The room was a bedroom, an expensive one, silk sheets, antique furniture. An elderly woman was sitting in a chair tied to it with duct tape. She was terrified, crying silently, and pacing in front of her holding a knife was Elijah. But this wasn't the Elijah from the press conference. The voice wasn't trembling, it wasn't soft. "Tell me the combination, you old witch!" Elijah hissed. The voice was cold, flat, demonic. "Please," the woman sobbed. "I gave you the necklace. I bought it back for you just like you asked. Please, just go." "I don't want the necklace," Elijah laughed. "I want what's in the safe, the bonds, the cash. You think I care about your sentimental trash? I pawned it once, I'll pawn it again." "Elijah, I'm your grandmother," she begged. "You're a bank account," he spat. The video cut to static for a second, then resumed. Elijah was wiping the knife on the bedspread. The woman was slumped over. Still. Silent. Elijah walked to the camera. He adjusted his hoodie. He smiled a chilling, dead-eyed smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked up the mahogany box from the dresser. "Thanks, Grandma," he said to the corpse. He reached out and turned off the recording. Detective Miller sat in the silence of the lab, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the timestamp, 4:30 p.m. The stop at the lake was at 6:45 p.m. Elijah hadn't been sketching the lake. He had been cooling off. He had been sitting there, adrenaline fading, sketching ducks with a backpack containing the murder weapon likely wrapped in the clothes at the bottom of the bag that Thorne hadn't checked, and the trophy of his kill. Thorne didn't find the knife. He didn't find the bloody clothes. He found the one thing Elijah had kept as a souvenir. Miller grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking. She dialed the chief. "Chief, don't release the kid. Do not let him leave the city." "Miller? What are you talking about? He's already gone. He's on a plane to New York for a morning show interview. The mayor paid for the ticket." "Chief," Miller choked out, "he didn't steal the necklace. He killed for it. We have a body." The pivot was violent. When the news broke, it didn't trickle. It flooded. Police had dispatched a unit to the address linked to Elijah's grandmother, a wealthy widow named Beatrice Holloway, who lived in the secluded hills 3 miles from the lake. They found her exactly as the video showed. Throat slit, bound, the house ransacked. The SD card was the smoking gun. Elijah had recorded it. Why narcissism insurance? A trophy. It didn't matter. He had documented his own atrocity. Elijah was arrested at JFK Airport as he stepped off the plane. The cameras were there, but this time the questions were different. He didn't look like a martyr anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. He spat at the officers. He screamed obscenities. The mask had slipped. The honor student narrative disintegrated instantly. The Justice for Elijah hashtags vanished, replaced by hashtag Justice for Beatrice. The GoFundMe was frozen. The NBA player issued a retraction. But in the chaotic swirl of updated headlines and horrified tweets, one figure stood in the center of the storm, vindicated but not victorious. Clay Thorne. The internet in its infinite whiplash tried to pivot back to him. Thorne knew. The cop was right all along. Instinct over optics. People started leaving 6-packs of beer on Thorne's porch instead of hate mail. The mayor called to apologize. The union rep told him he'd have his badge back by Monday with a commendation. Thorne sat in his living room watching the news coverage. They were playing the body cam footage again, but now the commentary was different. Now when he grabbed the kid and slammed him against the car, the pundits called it decisive action against a murderer. When he tore open the bag, they called it good police work. Thorne took a sip of whiskey. He should have felt triumphant. He should have felt like the hero who saw the darkness when everyone else saw the light. But he didn't, because Clay Thorne knew the truth, and the truth was gnawing at his gut like a cancer. He didn't know Elijah was a killer. He didn't see blood. He didn't see a knife. He didn't have a tip. He stopped Elijah because he was black. He stopped him because he didn't like the way a kid in a hoodie looked in his park. He lied about the smell of weed. He lied about the break-ins. He bullied a kid because he could. If Elijah had been white sitting on that bench sketching, Thorne would have driven past. He would have waved, and Beatrice Holloway would still be dead. But Elijah might have gotten away with it, or worse. What if Elijah hadn't had the necklace? What if he had dumped the evidence? Thorne would have harassed an innocent kid in the eyes of the law, found nothing, and the actual murder investigation would have been stalled because the lead suspect was being harassed for loitering miles away. Thorne realized that his instinct was just prejudice wrapped in a badge. He had stumbled into the solution by doing everything wrong. He wasn't a detective. He was a broken clock that happened to be right at the exact moment a tragedy struck. The trial of Elijah Holloway was the media event of the decade, but the legal battle that preceded it was the real war. Elijah's defense team was high-powered, funded by the initial wave of donations that couldn't be legally returned. Their argument was simple and devastating, the fruit of the poisonous tree. "Your Honor," the defense attorney argued in the preliminary hearing, "Officer Thorne had no probable cause. He admitted on record he was profiling. The search was illegal. The Fourth Amendment is clear. If the search is illegal, the evidence found is inadmissible. The necklace, the box, the SD card, all of it must be suppressed. It was a nightmare scenario. The video of the murder, the absolute proof of guilt, was inside a box that was found during an illegal search. If the judge followed the letter of the law, the video was out. If the video was out, there was no murder weapon. Elijah had dumped the knife elsewhere. No DNA on Elijah. He wore gloves and no confession. Without the SD card, Elijah walks. The city held its breath. The moral weight of the situation was crushing. On one side, a savage murderer who documented his crime. On the other, the foundational rights of the Constitution. If the police can break the law to catch criminals, no one is safe. If criminals go free because the police break the law, no one is safe. The judge, the Honorable Sarah Vance, took 2 weeks to deliberate. She was a strict constitutionalist. She hated bad policing. But she had seen the video in chambers. She had seen the grandmother begging. In the end, she issued a ruling that would be studied in law schools for 50 years. The doctrine of inevitable discovery. Judge Vance ruled that while Thorne's search was unconstitutional and reprehensible, the police were already investigating the grandmother's silence. Her neighbor had called for a welfare check 10 minutes after the stop. Police would have found the body, identified Elijah as the prime suspect, as the sole beneficiary, and inevitably obtained a warrant for his backpack and person. Therefore, the evidence would have been found lawfully, eventually. It was a legal stretch, a massive one. It was the judicial equivalent of a Hail Mary to save society from a monster. The evidence stayed in. Elijah pled guilty 3 days later to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life without parole. But Judge Vance wasn't done. In her closing remarks, she turned her eyes not to the defendant, but to the back of the courtroom where Sergeant Clay Thorne sat in his dress uniform. "Stand up, Sergeant Thorne," she ordered. Thorne stood. The room was silent. "Mr. Holloway is going to prison because he is a murderer," Judge Vance said, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. "But let there be no mistake in this courtroom. You are not a hero." Thorne stiffened. "You violated your oath. You violated the Constitution. You profiled a citizen based on nothing but your own bias. You lied about the odor of narcotics, a lie this court sees far too often. You bullied, you escalated, and you broke the law." She leaned forward. "You are lucky, Sergeant. You won the lottery of circumstance. You stumbled upon a monster while looking for a victim. But do not confuse luck with justice. Your actions nearly set a murderer free. If I had ruled differently, and I almost did, Elijah Holloway would be walking out that door today, and it would have been your fault, not the defense attorneys, not the law, you." She paused, letting the weight of it settle. "We do not bend the rules to catch the bad guys, Sergeant, because when we do, we become them. You are a disgrace to the badge you wear. I am recommending to the district attorney that you be charged with official misconduct and deprivation of civil rights. Get out of my courtroom." The gavel banged. Thorne walked out. The cameras were waiting, but this time they didn't cheer. They didn't scream. They just took photos of a man who looked suddenly very old and very small. Thorne was fired 2 months later. He lost his pension. He faced misdemeanor charges and pled out to avoid jail time, receiving probation and a lifetime ban from law enforcement. He moved away from Oak Creek. He moved to a small town in Florida where no one knew his name. He spends his days fishing on a pier. He sits there for hours watching the water, watching the people. Sometimes he sees a group of teenagers walking by. Sometimes they are black. They wear hoodies. They laugh too loud. And the old instinct rises in his gut. The heat, the suspicion, the urge to intervene, to check, to dominate. But then he remembers the weight of the mahogany box. He remembers the face of the grandmother on the screen. And he remembers the judge's voice. "You almost let him go." He realizes now that the greatest danger that day wasn't the boy with the knife. It was the man with the badge. The boy killed one woman. The man nearly killed the law itself. Thorne looks down at his hands. They are shaking. He puts his rod down and walks back to his car. The system survived Elijah Holloway. It barely survived Clay Thorne. And the lesson, bitter and cold as the ocean spray, is this: when you strip away a man's rights to find the truth, you don't purify the truth. You taint it. You don't protect the community. You gamble with its soul. And in the casino of justice, the house doesn't always win. Sometimes everyone loses. The sun sets over the water, beautiful and indifferent. It shines on the just and the unjust alike. But it takes a steady hand to tell them apart and a clean heart to keep the light from turning into fire. Thorne drives home in the dark. He is safe. The streets are quiet. But he checks his rearview mirror, constantly haunted by the ghost of the officer he used to be and the monster he inadvertently saved, then destroyed, then became. Justice is blind, but prejudice sees everything and understands nothing.
The incident review concludes here. To support continued transparency, kindly like and subscribe. We appreciate you watching Bodycam Incident Reports.